Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today on a discussion on cloud operations, a topic that has always been very near and dear to my heart, way back when I was at Oracle and then Twitter, and continues to be, which is partly why I joined AWS. So my name is Nandini Ramani, and I am responsible for all the monitoring and observability services here at AWS. So I know in the past, it's my first reInvent speaking here. However, I'm aware that in the past we've had one or two speakers from AWS, from the customers and partners to give you perspective on cloud operations and other topics. Today we're going to mix things up a little bit. And we're going to actually bring on 4 panelists to join me and share their perspective on cloud operations. And I anticipate that it'll be not only a learning experience, but also a fun-filled learning experience for all of them, because I've had the privilege of already meeting my co-panelists here, and so I anticipate it'll be really fun-filled. So let me share a little fact with you. Next week will be coming up on 8 months here at AWS for me, which in some ways I feel like an old timer, and in many ways I feel like it's day one every day. And when I say it'll be a learning experience for all of us, I literally mean I could be sitting right there with all of you and learning from all of our esteemed panelists. But instead, I have the pleasure of welcoming them on stage and interacting with them as we navigate through what it means to have really great cloud operations at scale with AWS, and how it impacts each of their respective businesses and business outcomes. So cloud operations, while it's an important topic and definitely on minds of executives as they move and transition from monolithic workloads that are on-prem to more modern architectures that are, these days built on more dynamically scaling infrastructure, sometimes cloud operations tends to be an afterthought because you're so focused on how do I move my applications to adapt to like container environments, or just some are so early in their journey, they're still figuring out how to lift and shift from on-prem to the cloud. However, the one takeaway I hope all of you will get from the insights that we're going to learn from our panelists is cloud operations is an integral ingredient in your transformation into the cloud. No matter where you are in your journey, doesn't matter where you're enterprise customers, startup, no matter which vertical. And to actually realize the benefits of what AWS has to offer, which is security, availability, reliability, and operational efficiency, you can do this really, really well, meet your SLAs, and focus on what really matters to your end customers, which is business outcomes, when you actually integrate cloud operations at the very onset of your transition. So one of the things that when I've joined, and I've heard this from before I joined AWS, customer obsessions. You look at the leadership principles and it's front and center of everything. And internally, it's so true. We do work backwards from the customer every single time. And so the other best way, I think, for us to tell our stories is to actually invite our customers to come and tell us how they use cloud operations with AWS to scale their respective businesses. And so I would initially like to first welcome to the stage Steve Martin, Executive Vice President of Enterprise Technology at Change Healthcare. So Steve will share his experiences with AWS, particularly in a vertical, which I used to be part of before I joined AWS, which is highly regulated. So can't wait to hear from you, Steve. Thank you for joining us. Next, I'd like to also welcome, as a customer, Sriram Iyer, Director of Enterprise Infrastructure and Solutions at GE. Thank you, Sriram. And Sriram will be sharing a perspective which is in a different vertical and at massive scale on how they leverage AWS and our cloud operations. And when we were discussing who else should be on the panel, we thought, okay, yes, we have customers, and AWS has millions of customers across the globe, and that's the first thing I was exposed to in my interactions, because 90% of our roadmap is dictated by customer requests. And then we thought about who else should we have, and in unison, everybody agreed it should be partners. AWS has more than 100K partnerships, which yesterday Doug mentioned in his keynote, if you recall. And these partnerships have really helped us, not just help our customers, but our common customers, whether it's in transitioning and migrating their applications over, or helping them navigate to these new infrastructures, whether it's EC2 with auto-scaling, container environments, or serverless. And partners have been a very key component of cloud operations for us. And to tell us and give us a perspective of both a partner and a customer, which they often tend to be both for us, I would like to welcome to the stage Sriram Iyer. I'm sorry, my bad. I will introduce them. A little nervous, I think, but anyway. Ashish Vyas, who's head of cloud infrastructure strategy and modernization at TCS. In my relatively short stint at AWS, one of the things I've done is have several customer meetings, and we have customers across the globe, different scales, like from startups to enterprises, across different geos. And one consistent theme I've heard throughout is, how does AWS operate at such scale? And to be honest, I was fascinated by that myself, and that's partly the reason I joined AWS, because having been at big organizations like Oracle and Twitter, one would think I understand scale, and then I start in here and discover, like one of the flagship services that I run, CloudWatch. In fact, we process each month 6 quadrillion metrics. And for me, I can't even comprehend the number of zeros there. So that's just to give you some of the scale. And then the curiosity of everybody asking, how does AWS do it? How do we do this at such scale? And to give us a perspective from AWS, I'd like to welcome on stage John Brigden, who is Vice President of AWS Managed Services, or more familiarly, as all of you know it, as AMS. Welcome, John.
Thank you.
So with that, I would like to get started. Give me a minute so I can put my mask on. So I think we're going to try to walk through some themes in this panel. And when you think of cloud operations, let's kick it off with the main topic, which is, how do you run cloud operations at scale? And like I said at the beginning, we always start with the customer and work backwards. So I'm going to start with you, Steve, and ask you the first question. So in your experience during this cloud journey, can you tell us how easy or difficult it is for you managing operations at scale in the cloud?
Yeah, just by way of background, very, very quickly, I worked at Microsoft for almost 15 years and was part of the Azure journey for the better part of 10 of that. So I got some background on what this means. Current job, we're responsible for a little over half of all of the healthcare claims in the United States. So imagine the stress that an organization might feel when you're moving a workload that has strategic importance to the healthcare of the United States during a pandemic into an Amazon environment with Amazon Managed Services. And so dealing with the scale of operations, and it's a really, really tricky workload because we have seasonality and whatnot. It's a lot of things to try to get right. And what I'm really proud of is the relationship that we have with Amazon to help us take that and make that as non-complex as we can. And Amazon has proved to be an amazing partner in helping us identify the places where they needed to help overperform for us while we were learning, and other places where you pushed us to get trained and think about operation scale, because a lot of the things that we did and the way that we managed the application left to right changed significantly in a cloud environment. And the patience, the resilience, the partnership was amazing to help protect one of the most critical workloads in the United States.
Yeah, that's really key, and I totally understand, having come from healthcare myself and worked with pharma and others. So let's shift to you, Sriram. What are some of your thoughts from a GE perspective, which, I'm sure is not one monolithic, uniform cloud operations across GE? So could you share some of the complexity of how you transition that using cloud operations from AWS?
Yeah, first of all, I belong to a division of GE called FieldCore, right? We are an industrial field services organization with more than 10,000 employees, and we mobilize employees 100,000 times in a given year, out of which 25% is cross-border mobilization. So there's a lot of movement going around. When we migrated to the cloud, it took some time for us to operate efficiently in the cloud in terms of the best practices to follow, what critical KPIs, KRIs to monitor, how to cost optimize due to the learning curve. So we ended up going with AWS Managed Services to help us with that, right? So even with AWS Managed Services, we had multiple choices. We picked a product that complemented our existing change management process in our ServiceNow platform. So in a nutshell, AWS Managed Services meets you wherever you are on your cloud journey and helps to optimize your cloud operations. So you asked about choices, right? Choices, in my view, gives you the flexibility and control to do things better and faster. In our case, everything needs to be simple, nimble, and fast. So that's what I think AWS Managed Services helped us achieve.
Great. So Ashish, shifting gears to you and how you think about it while you're either helping customers or common customers migrate their applications or entirely start their journey afresh in the cloud. As Steve mentioned, he's seen both sides of it, having been in Microsoft. Could you share some of your thoughts on how you think about cloud operations from AWS?
Sure. So there is definitely a very broad range of services and tools available with AWS. And as a partner, it is very convenient for us to really pick and choose what is the best of the breed, what is the best suited for a specific customer requirement or environment. So there are different stages when you enter the cloud operations phase. If it is a greenfield, then it is very easy. The choices are easy. You can always go with the cloud native monitoring and patching and all operational activities. But if it is a brownfield environment where there are some workloads, some applications which are running on-prem, and then you are migrating them to the cloud, you are modernizing those applications. In that cases, what happens is you bring in some operational legacies from the existing environment, and then you have to gel the cloud operations with the existing operations. And then you have to make sure that you create an integrated framework of solution which actually takes care of the new paradigm of whatever you are running on the cloud. So that's what I see. There is more and more asks for those type of hybrid environments that we see.
Yeah, that's a key point. And speaking of hybrid environments, I guess, John, could you share some of your perspective, having been at AWS for a while, on, I know that we typically, we create a lot of solutions for ourselves and then we turn them into capabilities for our customers. So having seen our own cloud operations journey internally, could you share some of your perspective on how does AWS do it?
Yeah, I would. Briefly here, just so everyone understands, I'm General Manager for AWS Managed Services, and our customers are our customers, AWS end customers, enterprises, and partners. When we built our service, we looked at how Amazon and AWS have evolved and literally taken, at one point in time, were monolithic large applications running in private data centers, and then eventually now have been refactored and are large microservice cloud native applications. And how we did that and how we designed and built AMS was really centered around three kind of key capabilities. First and foremost is security. Right? We call it Job Zero here at AWS. And so we have a real focus with our customers on security. And then it's a broad topic and a lot of pieces on it. We have a preventative approach and a detective, and then of course driving a lot of remediation. So we think a lot about security and staying ahead on that. The second area is around observability, which I'm sure you'll appreciate, which is how do we detect signals, not just at the infrastructure, but all elements of the environment, so that we can get an early detection on availability, on reliability, on security, degradation, and issues. And ideally, and we like to hold ourselves accountable to being proactive on pulling an incident before there's any impact and resolving things as early as we can. So we're proud of the fact that we operate today with our customers. At about 78% of the time, we're able to proactively identify a potential issue before it's seen or experienced by our customers or our partners. And last but not least on this third element is automation. And we really believe that whether you're a legacy application environment or a fully native environment, automation can play and needs to play a very important role. And we're constantly challenging ourselves as to how do we increase greater levels of automation, because we know that when we use automation correctly, it provides a very secure outcome. Most of the errors and risks that we create or that get created in an environment are usually the result of human error and the result of manual change. And so ideally we'd like to get to a fully immutable stack, but a lot of times that's not possible. And you need to operate in a mixed mode, and that could be a lot of different ways. So thinking about all the different ways we can introduce automation and driving a high level of predictability. That's really the three pillars of our approach.
Thanks for sharing that, and I agree. And internally, in fact, speaking of AWS, all of AWS uses CloudWatch, so I have seen it in action and how we proactively really take it seriously ourselves. So shifting gears a little bit, a big aspect of cloud operations is also governance and compliance. And John sort of alluded to it, and so did Steve. So let me start with you, Sriram. How critical is it in maintaining governance and compliance in the cloud for you within GE?
Yeah, in a shared responsibility model, customers get a jump start because AWS gets you halfway there, right? And as a customer, we have to cover the remaining half, which helps with our security commitment. Now, in our case, governance includes data privacy assessment, security control requirements, architectural and legal reviews. And as part of the governance process within GE, we have something called as new technology introduction process, which is with the goal of establishing a secure baseline configuration for any new AWS service. So any product or service needs to go through this process. In addition, any application that is on AWS are evaluated based on sensitivity of the data processed and access required. In conjunction with regulatory compliance requirements such as GDPR or SOX. Baseline for data protection and privacy is based upon GDPR. That is the highest standard that we go with. And then we fine-tune it based on the localization requirements such as China PIPL or Brazil DPP. We are a global organization, so we need to meet all those requirements. Finally, any data that is processed or stored goes through a data privacy assessment to establish risk and security controls needed.
It sounds like a lot, to be honest. So Steve, coming from a highly regulated industry, I would love to hear your thoughts on what role does governance and compliance play in the healthcare vertical?
Yeah, you bet. So as you guys know, as you just said, healthcare is one of the most regulated industries that we have. And I think a lot of people that are familiar with the topology in this space is what we've done largely is you've got security and compliance through obscurity. right? You've got dedicated instances of data in different places, then you wrap those instances via a database or file structure or whatever with whatever regulatory controls, and you tell yourself this wonderful story about how you've limited the access to that one asset in a way that makes you compliant. The hard thing for that, as you guys know, it's really hard to get synergy out of, and optimize your economics associated with that when every single thing you do is a one-off. It's also really hard to get any level of business agility out of it as well. So this was a turning point for us. We're going to move to an area where we have a more of an aggregation of our data, which increases our compliance responsibility that we have. And we put in another layer of technology that allows us to apply policy at a data level, but still manage our data in a data lake. And we've been really, really thrilled with not just the economics, but the doors that opens up for us when we're able to treat this in one environment. Because what I'll tell you, if you think that you're getting security and compliance through isolation, you're not, right? And actually centralized management, I believe, is going to beat isolation and on any day of the week over the long term.
I think that's a very key aspect because we hear this a lot. Everybody likes to start with, let me just isolate because there's no data bleed, there's none of this, and then one, it's not economical, and then you have other, like when you think about observability, when you have an incident, looking at it across all these different silos is much harder, and so I think that is a very key aspect. So Ashish, given you probably have a vantage point that spans across different verticals, different industries, different size and scale, can you tell us how you look at governance and compliance?
Sure. So we extensively interact with customers globally across different industry verticals. They come from different lines of businesses, etc. One common thing that we come across whenever we are talking to any of these customers is that they are very, very focused on the governance and compliance and security, of course. Because usually what happens is if you deploy the cloud and then you give a lot of control to the end users, after that there has to be some way of controlling the proliferation of those instances that individual users are creating, and then making sure that there are no security threats to whatever environment is being created for any application or things like that. So it plays a very, very critical role there. And then when we talk to them, then we have different workshops with them, and then we plan and design what kind of governance policies they should be implementing. And then see, as AWS partners, we are very confident on the native services that we leverage, especially the automation, because the security aspects are all inherent in that. So whenever you define any governance rules into the system, and then when you go and implement it, then as part of those design workshops, we are very confident that whatever we are building and whatever we are creating and defining, it is going to work. And then that creates a level of satisfaction and confidence in front of the customers as well. So
just so I'm understanding, and I'm trying to paraphrase what you're saying,
yeah.
AWS gives it to you out of the box for the most part, but you do have to work with the customer to integrate it into everything they're doing.
Absolutely.
Otherwise they're going to spin up their own instances.
That's true, because it is very customized for their own business, their own environment, their own requirement. So we have to have some detailed workshops with them and then design and plan those type of governance rules to implement the cloud operations.
So John, how do you, I know it's out of the box and our managed services do everything, and as Ashish mentioned, the native integrations make it seamless. How do you think about it, and what's your experience been working with customers as it relates to governance and compliance?
It's a really good topic, and I do want to just clarify one thing. So, and partly our name managed services, I think, and traditional use of that can sometimes misconstrue that, we're just doing all the work for the customer, and that's not the case. So our model by design is to augment, to help, to work alongside, to enable. In fact, most of our customers are looking to insource really their IT, and they want help. They want best practices. They want to run alongside us. So when we use managed services, we use it in that context of acceleration and bringing best practices. I think Sriram and Steve really hit a couple of points that are center to how we think about it. Number one, we talk a lot at AWS and at AMS about security by default. So it's the same way with compliance. We're trying to figure out where the bar needs to be and make sure we're higher than that everywhere. We don't want to be in a situation where we're less compliant here and more compliant there, because guess what? You're probably going to be compliant at your least level of compliance. And so we really want to set the bar, make sure the bar by default is in a comfort area that we're comfortable with. Secondly, again, this was the point that Steve made, which is, really kind of a zero trust approach as opposed to building walls and isolation and hope that you got it right. And that's obviously a big security concept. It's also true in compliance, and we care a lot about that. And then lastly, it's really all about observability. Really understanding what signals are early indicators of a compliance problem and champion that. And then we marry that with when we make a mistake or something happens that we don't like or we have an incident, we have a mechanism that we call a COE at Amazon, which stands for a correction of errors. So of course we want to find the root cause, but then in addition, we'll do a COE. And a COE really asks the why questions and keeps asking why. And then it leads to a set of actions that we then monitor the follow-up on those actions weekly as part of our core operational process, and we do this with customers. And this is really the way for us to kind of close loop our compliance execution. And because you're never going to get it perfect, but what you are going to do is you're going to iterate, and that's going to give you confidence. And then you're going to ask the same whys. And if you're asking the same whys over and over again, that's a why in and of itself, and that leads to a higher level action. So anyway, that's a long-winded answer, but those are really the key principles that we use that give us confidence that we're getting it right.
Yeah, and I have to say I've been fascinated with the whole COE process internally, and I've seen it in action. And it's such an iterative process, and obviously CloudWatch and observability play a key role every time there's an incident, going from detection to investigation and then remediation. And so I have seen how we iteratively make things better every time there is one. Not too many since I've been here, but nevertheless, to see it in action. So completely agree with that. Switching gears, I know a couple of you mentioned this earlier. When you talk about cloud operations, automation is like a very automatic, it goes hand in hand. And so I want to switch gears a little bit to talk about how automation is instrumental in cloud operations. So Ashish, working with so many different customers, could you tell us, like, they probably have varying degrees of automation within their on-prem solutions, and then you are helping them with the transition, or they're already on their journey, and how does automation play a part among these variety of customers that you work with?
Yeah, automation is very core to all our solutions that we provide to our customers and when we work with them. Because it is the basic building block of complete cloud operations solutions that we design and then that we propose and that we implement to all our customers globally. So for hybrid environment, for multi-cloud environments as well, there may be some existing tools, some existing automation tools which they may be using. But then as AWS partners, what we do is we give a front-end portal to our customers. We call it Cloud Exponents. It is a cloud delivery platform that is offered from our side as AWS partners to our customers. So what it does, it does all the cloud operational activities, right from provisioning to monitoring to patching to backup, restore. All these activities are done in an automated way using this front-end portal that we provide to our customers. And it does not only stop automation into the operational management activities, but also into the operational provisioning activities. For example, it will have IAM-based access for all end users of our customer organization. And based on their IAM roles, they can pick and choose from a given service catalog, and then they can go and provision the environment, they can provision the infrastructure, and then whole lot of things is done at the back end using all the cloud native automation options, or it can also integrate with the on-prem automation tool which the clients may have. So yeah, of course, automation, the basic building block and the core of all these offerings that we see globally across our customers.
So Sriram, would you like to share some of your experiences and why automation matters?
Yeah, in my view, automation is the name of the game for us, right? It completely changed the way we are doing things these days. Whether it be RPA or any of the AWS managed services solutions, I will give you a specific example. We use patch automation to not only exceed our internal patch compliance requirements, but it also helps us to decrease the patching time by more than 50%, so that the system is more available for our end users. We are now able to patch more systems in less time because it's fast, scalable, and eliminates human error, which John talked about earlier. We are also using automation to look for, to enforce tagging rules, compliances, and also look for non-compliance, right? Where someone creates a S3 bucket without encryption enabled, it will automatically delete those buckets. So I think automation is here to stay, and we'll use more and more of it within GE.
Interesting, yes. So Steve, I guess I have the same question for you, so go ahead.
Yeah, I think Sriram said they're really interesting at the end. To me, it's incredibly important because as you think about automation, there's two buckets. There's the making automatic the routine tasks that we perform so that a human being doesn't have to click the buttons, right? But far more important in the automation space is saving individuals from themselves.
Yep.
And ensuring that people fall into the pit of success rather than the pit of failure, right? And so just without show of hands, but just think to yourself, how many people have a system failure where you still accept human error as the root cause, right? Lots of systems do.
Yeah.
And I think what happens in your cloud journey, at least what our experience has been, is through automation, you get to a point where you get to ask yourself a really important question. Can I reject the premise of human error as a root cause analysis reason, as an output? Can I reject that and say, no, there's something deeper than that? I have to be able to automate. I have to ensure that there was never a condition in which a human being could have caused something that got us into this particular state. And that's incredibly powerful. It's far more powerful than the automation of the routine tasks that we see every day, because that's the place where you can start ensuring a level of operational efficiency, accuracy, and compliance that you're just not going to get otherwise.
Yeah, and I think that's key, right? There's two aspects to automation. One is how seamless and easy is it to set things up automatically with the type of parameters you want and configuration, et cetera. So that's one bucket. But I think the examples both of you are making is how do we save ourselves from manual errors?
Yeah.
So you do not create things that are suboptimal, and I think that's the second aspect of it. So John, would love your perspective from AWS, like how are we helping on both fronts?
Well, you know, this is probably the topic that we talk about all the time, like all day long, nonstop. And Steve's category uses exactly the same category we think about it. You know, obviously we'd like to get to an immutable state. And when we get to an immutable state, we can rule out all manual action. At some point, we got to start the pipeline and things along the way there. But even there, we'll have two-person rule and things like that we operate. Again, it's an Amazonian thing, AWS thing, two-person rule, which is where you got one person recommending a manual action, other person reviewing it before the action's taken. But if we back up and we say, okay, what are all the possible manual actions that we have left? And we will inventory those for all of our customers and for ourselves, both in the control plane and in the data plane. And then we will eliminate them. We will go about eliminate them, either through the architecture, which can address most of them, but in many cases we can't entirely eliminate them. And then we build automations in a repeatable fashion using AWS native tooling that's available to all of our customers, not proprietary, not going to lead us down a kind of a locked-in mode that stays with the customer and creates value that they can continue to use. Just to give you an idea, when you set aside all of our pipelines, you set aside all the access, type automations, all the automations that are built in to the AWS services. I mean, because that could be, billions in a given account or day. And you just reduce it down to just those things that we have left, where manual action is inevitable. Right now, just within our customer base, We have automated those to about 97.7% of all those are now automated. And in a given day, we will transact 1.254 of those manual actions in a fully automated way, million. So, I mean, we couldn't today do that manually. Like the notion that those are even manually possible to do is like we're way beyond that. And then the question becomes an architectural question, and then it becomes a resourcing on the architecture, and that's what brings us back fundamentally to the architecture, which is the right thing. We can't get it to zero, but that's what funds the motivation to get to an immutable place.
Cool. So one of the big things I hear when we talk to customers is they already use a lot of existing third-party tools, which I'm sure all of you do in your journey, whether you're on-prem, whether you're in a hybrid environment. And so my question, I guess, let's start with you, Steve, is how do you deal with, the transition from your existing tool sets? This is because not just switching from one to the other, but all your developers, there's lots of skill set, there's so many things you have to do in handling that transition. So could you tell us how you deal with third-party tools versus as you onboard to AWS services?
Yeah, and I would assume that for everyone else that's been through this journey, you start by decomposing it into three buckets. There's the class of technology for management that you're going to need to continue to operate that irrespective of where the workload is located. There's the places where you have some optionality around endpoint management, threat detection, those kinds of things where you could use one or the other, and you have to be thoughtful about it. But what's really important for maybe people that are newer into the journey is there's the third class of stuff. There's a whole new layer of complexity that you get to deal with in the cloud. And I'm here to tell you that AWS or Microsoft or whomever should not apologize for that. Because this was new for some of the folks on the team. When they would show up and say, oh my gosh, I have to learn all of these new technologies and tools to be able to to take advantage of serverless compute. I'd remind them, you don't have to. You can keep doing it exactly the same way you've been doing it today on a single monolithic stack. You can do that with your same products that are monitoring backend. But if you want to take advantage of some of these new things, then there's new technologies that you're going to have to learn to drive through that. And no provider should have to apologize for the complexity that normally occurs. But what I think it is really important is go back to that first bucket of things that are uniquely your own and assume that some percentage of those are actually going to be portable into your cloud journey. And those would be the things that I would tend to give up on last. So put that in the bank, continue to drive those. Make sure that you're smart about the management technology that you need to operate the new complexity that you have, and then be smart about the bridge over time. But make sure that you're in three different dialogues across those buckets.
Yeah, it's a great point. So Sriram, piggybacking on what Steve just mentioned, how do you go about that journey of migration from third party? And more importantly, how has AWS helped you through that journey? I get it, third party we shouldn't have to apologize, but nevertheless, would love your perspective on how AWS has helped you here.
See, our initial plan was to lift and shift applications to AWS, get comfortable on AWS before we start transitioning to a different technology, right? The goal is to utilize our existing investments, right? We don't want to just rip and replace things and go with something new. Because there is a change management aspect. People are used to doing certain things a certain way for a long period of time, and now you cannot force them to go and learn something totally new. So it takes time. For example, I can talk about ServiceNow incident management process that we already have to log, monitor tickets. Our end users go and open a ticket there. Our engineers look at the tickets. They rekey that information in AMS case management to engage cloud operations. So it's an inefficient process that we have today. We have to integrate those two systems, right? We cannot get rid of one to go to the other one. On a project that we are working on currently, we have enterprise standards that we need to abide by. So we use Jenkins for code deployment. We use Apigee for API management, right? And in conjunction with AWS services such as Cognito, Fargate, and things like that. So it is going to be a slow transition, moving from one technology to another, as long as you can create a good value proposition for the teams.
Yeah, and keep the end goal in sight. So, Ashish, maybe you can tell us how you handle, particularly like a lot of what you do is helping customers make this transition. And so what has your experience been in working with developers and helping them change that mindset, I guess?
So I would like to spend some good time on this point, because first of all, thank you. You brought up a very good practical point about these third-party tools, and Steve and Shriram also added very practical aspects of it. That third-party tools are there. You are moving from on-prem environment to the cloud. You are transforming the things. You are modernizing the applications. So, and at the same time, you have those users. The application users or even tech users who are utilizing certain tools and then doing the day-to-day operations and activities. So the first thing is that these third-party tools, for example, what Shriram mentioned about ServiceNow. So e-bonding definitely is there. It is going to stay, because whatever IT service management aspects you bring in your cloud operations, it has to gel with other broader operational activities which is happening into the hybrid environment. So you cannot just with a big bang approach, you cannot move everything from on-prem to the cloud. So this e-bonding, of course, is one thing which we have seen across the geographies. Different customers, they keep asking about that, how exactly we will do it, and then we sit with them, we plan it, and then we implement it. Second thing is, the beauty is that all the APIs for AWS cloud native tools are so user-friendly that it can be integrated using any custom-made integrations that partners like us create. Or we, for example, I mentioned about our Cloud Exponents platform, which is a delivery platform where you have this thing available with a click of a button, that you can integrate at the backend. You can integrate all the cloud native tools, and at the same time you can e-bond with the existing tools that the customers may have. And third and very important point is that I would like to add to what Steve was mentioning, is that many customers, they have existing investment on many tools. So they cannot just rip and replace it just like that. So that existing investment also has to be protected through these type of solutions. And then that is where we work very extensively with the customers and make sure that there is a proper balance between what they have invested in plus what new they are getting with more innovative approach to manage and operate their cloud environments.
Great, thank you for that.
Sure.
And John, would you like to close us out on your thoughts?
Yeah. This is a great question. Thanks for asking this question. It's not an obvious question, I think, if you're in the audience and you're thinking about, man, how do I get, operational excellence in the cloud for my environment? And third-party tools, might not come up if you thought about it, but it actually is a really important question. It raises, I'd say, three concepts that we think about a lot that it might help folks here. Number one, thinking about production operations before you migrate, early on, is a really good idea. It's a really good idea because it's easy to build in a lot of ways. It's not always easy to operate safely, securely, and efficiently. And you can make decisions in building or in migrating that make it harder and more costly for you to do the latter. And third-party tools plays into that conversation. So definitely want to be thinking about your production operation environment early on, and look around, get best practices. We'll happy to share with you what we think that is, but they're widely available. All the folks on the stage here have ideas on it. It's widely available. The second big topic is we think about choice, right? We don't want to tell a customer, hey, you can't use that third-party tool that you've used on-prem and you want to use it in the cloud. No, we're going to enable it. We may not choose to use it to deliver our service to help them, but we don't want to preclude the customer or the partner from using it. So we do a lot to enable compatibility and interoperability for our third parties and ISVs. And then the third piece to this, which I think is kind of neat, and I don't know if all of you are aware of this, but we have this concept of a marketplace on AWS where you can go and contract for and consume and literally download unlimited amounts of third-party capabilities. And the nice thing about that when we work with customers is rather than us licensing or driving entitlements to a third party, which then limit your ability to move off or make a change, right? We don't want to use a third party to create any kind of lock-in or reduce the flexibility our customers have. So if they want to use a third party, or we might even recommend third party in some cases, Our customers will facilitate that through the marketplace themselves, and we'll actually work with them to help them get a private deal if they are negotiating a larger scale transaction. We'll help them with that. But that then means the entitlement is held by our customer, by our partners directly, gives them a lot of flexibility and choice. So those are the three big rocks that I would think about when it comes to third party.
And I agree with that, particularly in this area of observability. We really want to meet customers where they are, which means if your choice is open source services, we provide managed versions of that. If you want a natively integrated solution, we provide you with that. And most importantly, we really work hard with our ISV partners to ensure that if that's your choice, we want the integration to be seamless so you can mix and match and use, if you want to use CloudWatch for metrics and use one of the ISV partners for logging and someone else for tracing, you can still do all of those, and you can either view it in a CloudWatch dashboard or in a managed Grafana dashboard. So that sort of ease of use flexibility, so you can stay on with whatever third-party tools you choose. In my area, it's specifically true and clearly true in the broader landscape of AWS. So I think now we're at the favorite part of my question to all of you. So as I mentioned at the very onstart of this, in the journey of migrating to the cloud operations and actually observing the data kind of comes as an afterthought. And the more you think about it with dynamically changing infrastructure, for instance, we're going, like I mentioned earlier, EC2 with auto scaling or serverless with containers such as EKS, ECS, and Fargate, and now serverless, your traffic is very dynamically changing. And the data you're generating is so much voluminous, and cloud operations become more and more important in that transition, especially as data with IoT and others becomes a key ingredient. So how does cloud operation actually, which is so far removed from your business outcomes, how do you see that as being, clearly me driving observability, I truly believe it matters for business outcomes, but I'd love to hear from each of you, and let's go down the panel, on how do you think it actually benefits your business and business outcomes for your end customers as well?
Yeah, sure, I can start. I think the logical thing would be for us to talk about the scalability. The workload that we have itself is peaked from 7 a.m. in the morning to 7 at night, 5 days a week with some monthly variability, which actually is really hard to tune, right? Because you have dark and light. But we figured all that out. I'll give you a much better story. Like everyone else at the beginning of the pandemic, trying to figure out what we're going to do. We're sending every employee home, right? No one's coming to the office anymore. We're learning new ways to work. But we took it as a remit to figure out how could we get more healthcare IT professionals to not have to be in the office. You know a really, really lame thing that a lot of hospital administrators do, provider administrators do? They go to the office, they pick up checks. Because of the work that we had done here, we spun up an initiative in under 2 weeks to get payment automation done from the payer all the way to the provider. We did a push out to all of our customers and said, click here, we're going to automate this for you. We eliminated a significant number of people having to come to the office to deposit checks, right? Does that sound trivial and small? It is. We probably saved a few lives in the process, right? And more importantly, it was that level of innovation, that level of creativity, and that level of response to market need that was enabled by the work that we were doing here.
It's a great example, and that actually reminds me of something Werner shared, our CTO, Amazon CTO, recently about at the onset of the pandemic in, I think it was Netherlands, and I hope I'm not misquoting him, but there were long lines for everything, and here in the US, as all of you know, we were standing in line for toilet paper. So there it was for bread and milk and whatever else. And so these college kids, based on AWS, created an app just so people could download it, and they had millions of downloads in the first week. And just to tell you the length of the lines and how long it'll get you to go somewhere. So based on your location, you can pick. Very trivial example, but supremely important. And the fact that they could spin up an app just like that with AWS, I think is of tremendous value, particularly during the pandemic. But sorry, I interrupted. I said we'd go down, and
no worries.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we are working on an exciting project called Live Outage. which will revolutionize outages, improve performance, and reduce our outage cost by 10 to 15%. So live outage is like TurboTax for field services, as it condenses all the field procedure manuals into an easily consumable format. And the target audience for this application are millwrights, people who are kind of, don't get to use all the digital tools and technologies, but we think it's the right thing to do for the organization to bring about innovation and so on. To build this application, we leveraged native AWS services. And AWS managed services can help us in a lot of areas, such as service requests, incident management, monitoring and alerting, backup and security management, logging, reporting. People think that it's only for managing EC2, but even for AWS native services, we need that help. You talked about observability, right? That is one thing that is key for us to be successful here. Trace the session right from the beginning all the way to the end. Identify issues wherever it happens. So I think there's a great opportunity here to work with AWS to see how we can be successful.
Mm-hmm. Great. Ashish?
Yeah, so from business outcome perspective, of course, I will talk more about the cloud ops, because mostly what we have seen is there is always a business case for really going to the cloud, and then after you go to the cloud, you have to sustain that business case in terms of how much are you consuming. Are you consuming sufficient? Are you consuming within the limits or not? So in basic terms, avoidance of capex and even saving on opex, these are the main business outcomes practically that I have seen globally. Customers, they come across and then they achieve it. Secondly, in terms of suppose you have moved some business critical application to the cloud, and then it is running 24/7 basis. You are monitoring it, patching it on day-to-day basis, and what you are doing is you are increasing the availability of that application. You are increasing the scalability and durability of that application. So what happens is, if that critical business application which is running on the cloud, it is not going down. It is running 24/7 basis without any interruptions, no manual errors, because you have implemented a lot of automation in that. So these all indirectly, you can measure a lot of things in terms of business outcomes, how you are reducing the disruption of your revenue generation applications, and then really saving the business outcomes perspective.
Great. John, would you like to close us out?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, we work with a lot of amazing customers that we have the opportunity to participate in their cloud transformations and the business outcomes that they experience, which is a lot of fun. So I got a lot of stories that are pretty cool. One that just pops in my head when I was thinking about this, that I think is pretty cool. One of our customers, a financial services company, regulated, I think I could say their name, but I don't need to, but it's a large financial services company, and they have to demonstrate that they can do a full-fledged disaster recovery outcome. And in the past, it really was like it was a huge stressor for them. They would plan months in advance. The CIO, CEO, like everyone was very hopeful that would go well, and if it didn't, and all sorts of penalties and other sorts of things, and they would literally, have the regulators on site, and it would be a week-long or 2-week-long exercise, and sometimes they wouldn't know the results for a month, and lots of tests, and it was really, and then after they moved to the cloud and migrated, and we had the opportunity to help them once, we did the first one, and it went well, and I think we did it over a weekend. It took about 48 hours, and it was about like 85% automated. And then our team worked on it, and the next quarter, we did it again, and it was 24 hours, and it was 92% automated. So we tracked this for like 4 or 5 quarters of getting better and better, and this is the last week, they just done their latest one. This is about 1.5 years into this, and it was like 2.5 hours and fully automated. And it was like, now nobody cares about it. Like, oh, it's just a DR test, that's no big deal. We're just gonna check that box. And now they're just, we don't even talk about it anymore. I remember when we first started engaging them, like that was like their biggest IT challenge that they faced every quarter. And now it's not even their top 10 worries. And so they're focused on other things. And that's the kind of thing that's fun. But, to Ashish's point, you got to stay on it though, because the cloud speed, like that was a big deal, but that's now in the rearview mirror. Now there's 10 other things that are in the front that we're talking about.
It's so true, because I think when the time it becomes so critical is when you have downtimes. And the mean time to resolution has direct impact on your business outcomes and everything. And that's where I think cloud operations comes in. And it's really top of mind during the incident. And now the rest of the time you never think about it. It just works and it just keeps all of your cloud running and you just never have to think about it. So it's a very critical point. So I know we're almost at time, so let's just wrap up. I would love to hear from each of you, particularly our customers and partners, what's next for you in your cloud journey and what are your organizations respectively going to be doing next? So if you want to kick us off.
Yeah, happy to start. So for us, it's going to be looking at each of the teams that's leveraging AWS and identifying what's the best use of their capacity. Do we go deeper in automation with AMS with more managed services in that area to free up capacity for them to do more core dev work and innovation? Do we need to be operationally excellent in some workloads, in which case we're going to be more intentional about what we have to self-manage, even if it means coming at the expense of doing more innovation. But and some things like our medical network is an example. I mean, operational efficiency is the most important thing. So more intentionality about that. The other thing that I would say is ensuring that we've got a culture, left to right, top to bottom, beginning to end, on optimization. Right? I think one of the things that Amazon taught us is the GM model, service by service by service. And whether we like it or not, want it or not, the people that work in engineering organizations are going to have to start acting more like GMs, right? Because the way you design some of the components, what services you use, are going to determine a lot more about your profitability of that aspect than anything that's actually happening on the front end, right? And so I think that's critical in making sure that you get a culture that believes that and understands it from beginning to end.
That's great. Sriram?
Our former CIO used to say this: support is a thankless job, right? You don't call your cell phone provider and say, hey, everything is working great, thanks for doing that, right? You'll only hear when things are not working. Now, having said that, from the innovation perspective, we are working on this nice before I go there, AWS Managed Services, one of the reasons why we went there is it frees up our employees' time to work on what the business really wants, right? Rather than worrying about day-to-day operations. I think there are a few projects that I can name, like augmented reality, virtual reality for safety training and things like that, which was an outcome of IT teams working closely with the business. And I also talked about the Live Outage project, where we are adding new capabilities and we are using AWS services such as Amazon Translate for language services, AWS Elemental Media Convert to optimize the video quality and things like that. So as we get more comfortable in the cloud, I think there is a great opportunity for us to leverage new technologies rather than go and build. It's build versus buy, right? What makes sense?
Great point. Ashish?
So had this question came to me, few reinvents before, I would have passionately spoken about automation and what all kind of things we are doing, automated resolution of tickets, automated provisioning and zero touch and so many things. But this is given now. Where we are standing today, these all things are given. So where we as partners, we see the next innovation is now clients are more asking about predictive and proactive operations. They are saying why alerts and why the systems are generating alerts and it is getting captured by some automation engine and then it is doing some automated resolution of the tickets and solving the problems. Why can't we eliminate the alerts itself? So why well before in time we can leverage machine learning and we can leverage AI and then we can create some innovative solution which well before time it knows that there are some anomalies in the system which may impact something in future and some alert may be getting generated after some time. So it will suppress the alert itself. So there will not be any alert and it will automatically make the things running more smoothly and with less number of disruptions. So that is the next level of innovation that I see as we see as partners.
It's a great point. So do you want to close us out, John?
Yeah, just one quick thought. Those are great. Those are fun answers, and I really think they're all fantastic. And again, I think Steve so nailed it on the GM observation. You know, from our perspective, reInvent is a blast because all these announcements are going on, and I know what's coming, and I know what's happening the rest of the week, and I know I'll be able to tell most of my customers that thing you just saw on stage, we've already turned it on in your accounts, and we're going to take advantage of it. You're going to get the benefit, and that's super fun. And then with Outpost coming out, the ability to go, you know, into a hybrid environment with our customers and take everything we built in the cloud and deliver that on premise for them is exciting. But you know, it's just a tremendous amount of customer demand signal and things that we need to get after. So it's never-ending fun journey.
Yeah. So thank you all for attending. The main key takeaway I want for all of you is everything you heard from them. Today in your journey, cloud operations is really critical, and I hope all of you can leverage it so you can meet your SLAs and actually focus on what matters to your business most. And I agree, I joined, and yes, I run observability, but also interested holistically in cloud operations. We want to get to a point that Ashish alluded to where today we have alerting and we have anomaly detection in CloudWatch, but it's barely scratching the surface, right? We want to get to a point where people don't have alarm fatigue. We want to get to a point where you already see the patterns, and even before, you don't need any detection. So if there's anything that's going wrong in your system, we should be able to proactively remediate that. And that's the future toward which, like, I'm excited to go. And even though I run an area that, you know, is generally, like I said, an afterthought, this is what excites me. When it works well, people shouldn't even know you're there, like electricity. They should only see you, hopefully rarely, when something goes wrong. And so that's the future I look forward to. And really looking forward to working with all of you in helping us mold and craft what that should look like. So thanks once again, and please enjoy the rest of reInvent.
Thank you.